This is off the subject what I was making, but it's certainly on this subject. So one of the things I learned very quickly when I was an organizer of welfare rights, I was 20 years old, I was in Springfield, Mass. And what did I know about organizing? It was all sink and swim then. Nobody even pretended to train you. Or, you got a call, hey, I heard you might be willing to go to Springfield and organize welfare rights. This is what the difference in movement is as opposed to organizations like we built with ACORN. So you said yes or you said no. You showed up, and when I got the call to organize for welfare rights, I said, well, I was 20 years old, so at that age, maybe like some of you, I knew fucking everything, which is how I started ACORN at 21. So when they called me, I was a student, like some of you are students. I was on my recidivism. I was on my second time I dropped out of Williams once to organize against the war. There was the Vietnam War. That was a war that was going to really end all war. I mean, there was a vibrant protest movement. We were really going to change something in this country. And we did. Not, unfortunately, permanently. But so I dropped out the first time to organize against the war, had some problems with the police, whatever, went back to school. That was a good place for people to hide. I'm sure it still is. And then was looking for a job, couldn't find a job driving a lift truck, which is what I knew how to do. There were no oil fields in western Massachusetts. I was married then for a brief period of time. So they called and I said, well, I'll go down to Springfield and check out whether or not Springfield is ready for welfare rights to be organized. And I still to this day don't know what I was how I would have known if Springfield was ready. But they, on the other end of the phone, they certainly seemed to respect whatever I was saying, and I certainly had no idea what I was talking about. But I went down, I hitchhiked down there. My car had broken down. It wasn't a car; it was an old Ford Econoline van that had a sort of a hippie thing, gypsy suede. It sort of was a symbol on it on the side, and racing stripes that my ex-wife had printed. I don't know if I mentioned this was 1969 or sometime in that period. And so I went down. I ended up having to hitchhike down because the truck was leaking in the radiator. I got down, stayed on sleeping bag on some guy's porch that edited the underground newspaper for Springfield Mass, which Springfield's not a big town. It's sort of like a Madison size, it was 200 and change or whatever. And I walked around the neighborhoods. I was there 2 or 3 days and hitched back up to Williamstown, and I guess I decided it was ready. I called, oh, it's ready, and then nothing happened. I went down there, and you start trying to organize something, and 2 months later, you have your first meetings, and they send somebody from the Boston Office of Welfare Rights and say, gee, I guess you knew what you were doing, but you didn't know. Anyway, where this comes into this is one of the techniques I developed for how to get in people's doors, because I didn't have any particular skill. I just had, whatever enthusiasm I brought with it. But we had this campaign in welfare rights where you could get, we argued, special needs program. You could get furniture from the welfare department. So we devised a form. These are classic organizing campaigns, and it's just a tragedy more people don't do it. So if we found out Joel was on welfare and he was an AFDC mother and he had 4 sheets per bed, by God, we'd write down 4 sheets per bed. And we found out Laura had a chair for every child that the welfare had paid for around her kitchen table. It'd be on the form. So I would go to welfare recipients and actually, walk in, and it may sound a little bit like I was a furniture salesman, but I would say, hey, do you have 4 sheets per bed for every child? Do you have? Hey, and I'd get in the house. To do good in this rap, I'd have to get in the house and say, where is the chair for everybody in your family around the kitchen table? Where are the couch and 2 chairs you're supposed to have? You don't have those things, but you're supposed to have those as rights in the welfare system. So sometimes to get in, I would knock on the door, they'd come out, and there's always testing and organizing is common, and I would have a clipboard and paper, and I would just drop them all over the porch, and they'd come out and help me pick them up, and the next thing you know, I'd be in the door, and we'd sit down and have that conversation. And I'd train people in how to do this, because a lot of people, it's all about listening and organizing. If you can get people to start talking to you, and the point is not your ego, the point is obviously to move people in with you. And if all I had to do was drop a couple of papers on the porch to get in, usually I could get in, and gradually I got good enough I could talk my way in. But when I first started, 20 years old, not knowing nothing, and I got this job for the summer by hey, they said you can go organize in Springfield, Massachusetts, and I then had to go talk a community center into paying me. That was the job. Was you got the license and a phone call to go be welfare rights in Springfield, Mass. And boy, did I love that. I never went back. I mean, that was it for me. And Williams, that was it for me and forever. And I think that's probably a good time to stop. So I talked about all this. So coming back to welfare rights, I really care about whether or not people get every single thing they're entitled to. I'm still a 4 sheets per bed guy. And if there's a thing that says food stamps or a thing that says EITC, it's so hard to get new legislation passed that helps low to moderate income people. If something is actually part of the program, there's something wrong if we're not making sure there's what I call maximum eligible participation, that we're getting everybody in that. And so this was part of, in Citizen Wealth is obviously my argument for how we ought to do a whole lot more of that and make it more ubiquitous, like this, that, and the other. So that's part of what gets me on these listening tours from time to time. So I was asked to do a panel tomorrow at some conference, and it was Milwaukee, and it was so close, and I hadn't seen Joel for some time, and Wisconsin is now ground zero of class war, supposedly, so hey, I want to be somewhere near that, and I'd read all of y'all's articles about, we are Wisconsin, and a revolution is coming, this time it'll start in the snow, and so turn that down, get me there, and I'll figure out a way to make it happen. So that's what puts me here and gets you lunch, and I'm interested in whatever questions you may have.